Years ago, I was on this river bank, exactly where I am now. I'd just come back from the war, and I'd come up here for a night sea trout fly fishing on this enchanted little river. And at daybreak, I sat here and watched the sky catch fire behind Scaw Fell. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. It was all so quiet, so peaceful. Just as it is now. For me, the most beautiful valley in England. And at sunrise, I sat here and watched the light winking on the windows of a little cottage up there on the fellside. I thought a man who lived in that cottage could be a happy man. So I suppose you could say that I'm a happy man, because that's where I live and do most of my writing. Somewhere outside those fells is the world about you. But this little valley, with its people, its wildlife, and its river, is the world about me. I caught this morning's minion. Kingdom of Daylight's Dauphin, dappled dawn-drawn falcon in his riding of the rolling level underneath him steady air. My heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achiever of, the mastery of the thing. Gerard Manley Hopkins on the Kestrel, arguably the finest lines ever written about any animal. This one nests in a pine tree in a little wood just up there behind the cottage. Right next door to a carrion crow. Rather odd, really. Close by, there's a little beck that flows down from the Latterbarrow Crag and runs beside the pine trees. A local heron fishes here for eels. Sometimes, after it's had a meal, it flies up and settles in the crow's tree, and out comes the crow like a fighter plane and drives it away. It isn't bothered much. It just flaps off towards the crag and fishes the beck higher up. It comes from the big heronry at Muncaster Castle, a couple of miles away. Herons have nested there for hundreds of years. I wonder what Hopkins made of the buzzard. He never wrote about it. This one has the cottage right in the middle of its territory. It often gets mobbed by the rooks that nest just outside the kitchen door. Some people don't like rooks nesting near a house, but I don't mind. I like the raucous sounds they make, especially when the young rooks are being fed. But of course, crows and rooks aren't the only corvids nesting in the valley. Way up behind the cottage is the impressive mound of Raven Crag. Not difficult to guess how it got its name. Ravens have nested on this ledge ever since I've known it. This young bird is almost ready to fly. In spring and early summer, the river is usually very low. The adult salmon and sea trout that went to sea as smolts during the last year or two won't be back for another month at least. These 2-year-olds that have grown up in the river will soon be on their way downstream, going out to sea for the first time. The valley is rather like a wildlife hotel, housing a few residents and a host of visitors that arrive and depart according to the season. All along the river bank is the fragile delight of the willow warbler. When I hear it, I feel summer's really come. I'm always moved by the sight of such tiny migrants. They travel such vast distances and perform such staggering feats of navigation. The cottage garden, with its trees, shrubs and ivy-covered dry stone walls, is a popular nesting place. So is the garden shed. I left the door open overnight, and now it'll have to stay open all the summer through because the swallows nipped in and started to build. They hit on a safe enough spot, and they needed to. Put is 18 years old, but he'd still love to get at those baby swallows. When he was young, he used to catch bats, sat up on the cottage roof behind a chimney pot and grabbed them as they flew past. He's too old for that now, though he can still climb the garden shed, as this parent bird is well aware. But he's very frightened of strange noises. I once watched him stalking an old cock pheasant. When he was 2 or 3 yards away, the pheasant gave a tremendous squawk. Putty fled like a streak of white paint. Of course, he isn't the only animal in my life. Well, I think it's time I introduce my dogs. This is Prince. And this is Stinky Wow Wow. Rather a comical name, but then he's rather a comical dog, as you will see. Prince is mad keen and quite straightforward. But Stinky prefers to do his retrieving underwater. Well, what a clever boy. Where's the fun? Making the pool a little deeper for Master, are you? You got a great big stone, have you? That's right. You bringing it up for me? You silly old fool. There are mounds of stones that he's fished out all along the river bank. He's a compulsive retriever. If you leave him alone, he'll spend hours at it, summer or winter. They're both fine working dogs, though nowadays Stinky Wow Wow is in semi-retirement. An old gentleman of great character, going rather deaf. He takes life very much at his own pace. On our way down to the river, we usually have a dog race, but Stinky isn't very fast, so he gets a big handicap. Prince usually starts from this gateway. Prince, come on, sit. Good boy, you stay there. Incidentally, what a lovely old gateway it is. It's called a heck, a northern term, probably from the early Norse. It's very simple. It's just 2 great big slabs of slate with holes cut in them. And when you want to use it as a gate, you simply put poles across like this. When you want to open it, you take them out. It's very primitive, very practical, and it's very old. This one here has got some initials cut in it, and the date, 1819. Just 4 years after the Battle of Waterloo. I expect these stones have been here for hundreds of years. It'd be very nice to think they'll be here for hundreds of years to come, because there aren't very many gateways like this about these days. Well, let's get on with the race. Stinky, you come with me. Prince, stay there. Come on, boy, come on. Come on. Come on, Stinky. There we are. Sit. Sit. Good boy. You stay there. Stink seems to have got a tremendous lead, but Prince will win. He nearly always does. Come on! Come on, Stinky. Come on, then. Come on. Come on, you can do it. Come on. Stink. Come on. Well, you poor old fella. Got beaten again, all right? It's simple pleasures, but they love it. And you see, it's really rather important, because if you want happy dogs, you've got to contrive situations where you can make a fuss of them. You see, their ancestors were wolves, pack animals, and now they're domesticated. We've got to give them the dominance, the attention, the personal contact, grooming if you like, that they'd get in the natural state from other members of the pack, and which instinctively they must feel the need for. Come on, come on, come on. Prince, sit. Sit. They're wonderful dogs, and I love Labradors. But keeping dogs is a great responsibility. I had a yellow Labrador once. He used to wait for me just here when I fished down this little run for salmon and sea trout. And when he was old, he got cancer. I had him operated on twice, but it didn't work. And very early one morning, I found him in great pain. I couldn't get the vet. So I got a spade, and I came down here at daybreak and dug a hole. And then I got my gun and a piece of chocolate. He was very fond of chocolate. And when he saw the gun, his tail started to wag, and he came down with me. And I gave him the chocolate, and I shot him. He didn't feel a thing. I wrapped him in my shooting coat, and I buried him just here. And I painted his name and the date on this big flat stone. Well, that was 20 years ago, and the rain and many a winter flood has long ago washed out the letters and the numbers. But the stone's still there, and I like to think of him, lying there very close to the river that he loved so much. And I expect you think that I'm very sentimental, and perhaps I am. But I don't care. You see, I can pass this spot without regret. I gave that dog as good a life as I could, and when the time came, as quick a death. I only hope that one day, if necessary, someone will do as much for me. Of course, the dog plays an important part in valley life. Farming is almost entirely sheep and cattle, and dogs are a necessity. My wife's brother, Benny Armstrong from Crag Farm, has about 400 ewes with their lambs up here on Raven Crag. It's wild country, difficult to patrol. Last spring, in less than a fortnight, he lost a dozen lambs, killed by foxes.
Good dog, get away. Fat John, get away. Get away, Buck. Get away. Get away, Buck. Fat John, get away. Good dog, Fat John. Hello. Fat John, good dog.
A few thousand years ago, these Cumbrian fellsides were dense forests, mostly oak and birch, the haunt of wolves, boars, kites, pine martens. Gradually, the forests were cut to make charcoal for iron smelting, and sheep prevented the regeneration of trees. But of course, our countryside has always been in a state of change. And today, a skyline of bare fells is more pleasing to some eyes than a line of factory chimneys. From the top of Raven Crag, there's a magnificent view straight up the valley towards Hardknott. Hardknott Fort, built by the Romans, is 800 feet above sea level. Its purpose was to control the pass between Ambleside and Ravenglass. And for me, it has great atmosphere. This fort was built about 1850 years ago, and it was very well built. Look at the facing on those cornerstones. And look at the line of the wall. It was made mostly of local rock, but these red sandstone blocks, which have been found round each of the 4 gateways of the fort, must have been trundled up by ox cart from the coast, because there's no red sandstone anywhere around here. And this, incidentally, was the main gateway, and it led up towards the administration blocks and the granaries, and over there the CO's quarters. Outside the north gate is a precipice overlooking the river. From here there's a wonderful view of the mountains that inspired Wordsworth when he wrote about that lone camp on Hardknott's height, whose guardians bent the knee to Jove and Mars. To us, it's a scene of romantic beauty. But to the soldiers of southern Europe, Hardknott in winter must have been a dreadful posting. How many men, I wonder, stood on this rock and dreamed of home? A remarkable feature of Hardknott Fort is the old Roman parade ground, an artificially levelled patch of about 3 acres, 200 yards northeast of the fort. On one side of it are the remains of a man-made ramp. This mound was the tribunal or saluting base from which the commanding officer took the parade. Perhaps once a Roman emperor stood here and addressed his troops. As the Raven flies, it's about 10 miles to the coast, and we get an idea of what the valley looks like today as we travel down towards the old Roman fort at Ravenglass. On either hand, dry stone walls stretch for mile after mile into the wilderness, reminders of the Enclosure Acts of 200 years ago, that legalized rape of the common rights. But the skill of building walls without cement or mortar is by no means forgotten. Leslie Armstrong is mending an ancient wall above the family farm. Perched high above the valley is Devonwater, surely the most beautiful of all the lakes. Its lonely shores are reputedly haunted by the great white sow of Eskdale, perhaps the ghost of the sow of Alba Longa, the white pig whose litter represented the 7 hills of Rome. And you can believe that if you want to. The trout in the lake are said to come from a special strain introduced centuries ago by the monks of Furness Abbey. Whatever the truth of that, they're inclined to be small and hard to catch, but very good to eat. At least my friends Barr and Joe Woodall think so, and they should know. They are local farmers and their family has fished here for over 100 years. Somewhere between Hardknott and Ravenglass, the Romans must have crossed the river. The exact spot isn't known, but wherever it was, there's no doubt that they must have watched a scene similar to this. It's one of the most astonishing sights on earth: baby eels swimming upstream from the sea. In the whole range of natural history, there's no life story more remarkable. This little bootlace eel, or elver, really is one of nature's miracles. Over a period of 3 years, travelling with the Gulf Stream, it's come nearly 4,000 miles from the depths of the Sargasso Sea, destined perhaps for some distant tarn high among the fells, and determined to get there. And get there it shall. But on some dark autumn night many years from now, this eel, when fully grown, will set off on its long return journey to reproduce and die. Westwards along the old valley road, close to the overgrown ruins of a Roman tile kiln, we find dairy farmer Stan Roberts exercising his trail hounds. He was a famous wrestler, 6 times world champion, Cumberland and Westmoreland style, and he's always been a great hound trailing enthusiast. A hound trail is an aniseed drag that runs across miles of bracken and scrub and rock. It's a tremendous test of strength and fitness, and the hounds get road work every day. They need it. The trail finishes in a field behind the village pub, right next door to the cricket ground. No mention of Eskdale would be complete without some reference to cricket. There are many better wickets in England, but few I fancy that are set in such beautiful surroundings. The run stealers flicker to and fro. But it's the people behind the scenes, the secretaries and scorers and grass mowers, and in particular the tea makers, that really keep village cricket alive. Homemade cakes and buns don't materialise by magic. They're made by people that 1,000 cricket clubs depend on every weekend the summer through. And as a cricketer myself, I should like to pay them tribute. At the bottom of the valley, where the river becomes tidal, stands Manchester Castle, built 800 years ago. It commands a magnificent view. Ruskin described this as the gateway to paradise, and I won't contradict him. This is the Great Hall. It's in the oldest part of the castle, the Peel Tower, which somehow escaped the ravages of civil war. It has certainly seen some strange happenings. Among its more illustrious visitors was Henry VI, during the Wars of the Roses. He took refuge here while on the run after losing the Battle of Hexham. From a window in what was once the royal bedroom, you can see the tower that marks the spot where the wandering king was found by two estate shepherds. They brought him to the castle, where the owner, Sir John Pennington, hid him. In return, the king gave Pennington a bowl, known as the Luck of Manchester. In this painting it looks rather like a custard bowl, but I'm told it's of great value. In spite of all this, one of the most remarkable characters the castle can boast is Tom Skelton, or Tom Fool, the last jester of Manchester, said to have been known to Shakespeare, and to be the man from whom the term tomfoolery was derived. He certainly had a bizarre sense of humour. In his last will and testament, displayed in this full-length painting, he says, "And when I'm buried, then my friends may drink. But each man pay for his self. That's best, I think. What they thought isn't on record." But Tom was more than a miser. Among the Pennington family, who for centuries owned the castle, was young Heloisa Pennington. She was betrothed to a local squire, but had the misfortune to fall in love with an estate carpenter called Richard the Joiner. The squire, who suspected there was some hanky-panky going on, gave Tom Fool the wink to keep an eye on things. Tom did better than that. He arranged for Richard the Joiner to get into the castle at dead of night for a secret meeting with his lady-love in an upstairs chamber of the main tower. Then, when simple Richard was in here waiting, Tom pounced on him with an axe and lopped his head off.
Ooh! This is the secret passage in the castle wall, from which Tom Fool is supposed to have sprung out into the chamber and clobbered the unfortunate carpenter. This is the wall of the original Peel Tower, and it's immensely thick. There's a spiral staircase that leads right down through the castle wall to ground level. This is probably how Tom disposed of the body.
It is said that on a wild winter's night up on the battlements, you can hear poor Heloisa wailing for her lost love and see the ghost of the unlucky joiner shuffling about, presumably looking for his head. A mile or so beyond the castle is the Ravenglass Nature Reserve, a glorious, unspoiled stretch of sand dunes with 10,000 pairs of black-headed gulls and many other species, including the remarkable natterjack toad. The natterjacks spawn in shallow pools among the dunes. They are very rare. This is one of the few places in Britain where they're still found. The ruins of the Roman fort at Ravenglass bring our little travelogue from Hardknot to an end. Here,
curling round between two great sweeps of sand dunes that once sheltered the Roman fleet, the river becomes an estuary, and the estuary becomes the sea. I spend a lot of my spare time at sea off the coast of Ravenglass, fishing with my friend Paul Peterson, the best fisherman I've ever known. His son played rugby for England and his daughter dances in the England ballroom team. If they gave caps for inshore fishing, this man would get one. Of all the food producers, I admire the sea fishermen most of all. Whatever its mood, the sea is never safe. To fish successfully, you need skill and knowledge and a nose for weather. This is a bad coast. Shoal water and rocky outcrops. A sudden shift of wind and you can be in trouble. It all looks easy enough, but you can get a few bruises when the boat is rolling on her beam ends and you're braced against the pitch of the sea trying to haul the net. I do this for sport and for the fish I take home. To catch food to eat makes sense of sport to me. But I also get pleasure from the fact that I can do it, that I'm a good enough fisherman. I suppose it's the same sense of achievement that a climber feels at the top of his cliff. I believe that basically all men are hunters and need to satisfy their hunting instinct. And to do so, some hunt for money or acclaim or power. But I just hunt for food. How about this for a lobster supper? All this may seem a very primitive philosophy, but it's as valid as any in this extraordinary life that nobody understands. I know that when my work gets hung up, there's no better therapy than a few days at sea. I come in exhausted, mentally refreshed, supremely happy. I can honestly say that my wife Kathleen is a wonderful cook and a wonderful gardener. And not surprisingly, she's a very good naturalist. Her home was at Crag Farm, quite close to the cottage. She's lived in the valley all her life and shares my love for it. Nothing that we buy means quite so much to us as the food we catch or grow ourselves. I greatly enjoy my work as a writer, filmmaker, broadcaster. To try to give other people pleasure naturally gives me pleasure. But I've never thought of my work as being of paramount importance. Our way of life here at the cottage has always come first. My work simply makes it possible. And Kathleen's skill makes it all the more enjoyable. There's a feeling of security here that I get nowhere else. And illusory though this may be, it is nevertheless very comforting. With 2 Labradors to feed, very little food ever gets thrown away. They get their dinner at the same time every day, and they know very well they won't get it any sooner. But that doesn't stop them looking in from time to time, just to check up.
Now, who told you two to come in? It isn't time for your dinner yet, so off you go out and wait. Now go on, off you go.
Of course, we're nothing like self-supporting, but we don't do too badly. There are fish fresh from the sea and from the river, game and wildfowl, and occasional sheep from the fell, vegetables from the garden, and bread from the oven, the best I've ever tasted. Why anyone puts up with some of the bread they buy in Britain these days never ceases to astonish me. Any leftover crusts get toasted and mixed in with the dog's meat and biscuit.
Hello, boys. I think it's time for dinners. Go on, Stink, fetch your dish. That's a good boy. Come on. Hurry up. Now go and get the other one. Go on. Go and get the other one. Come on, Prince. Come on, Prince. Come on.
As the summer lengthens, the valley becomes alight with wildflowers. We have great fun trying to find new species. I've always been fascinated by the names. The spring flowers are over, and now we have the dog rose, honeysuckle and wild iris, the meadow sweet that grows here in profusion, marsh bird's foot trefoil. Who ever thought of that name? The pyramid orchid that you find amongst the bog myrtle where the pheasants nest, the hawkbit with its gorgeous tones of yellow, and the ubiquitous foxglove, to name only a few. Then the insectivorous species, one in particular. Up here on the moorland, just above the cottage, in this sphagnum bog, amongst the bog myrtle and the cotton grass, and this beautiful little clump of water forget-me-nots, is one of our most astonishing plants, the sundew. It would be a crime to pick it. It's so tiny, and yet so dramatic. It lives on flesh, the flesh of insects, which it traps with its leaves. Let's have a look at it in super close-up. Of all plants, this is one of the most beautiful and the most deadly. Each sundew leaf is festooned with tentacles that end in gorgeously coloured droplets of highly viscous fluid. This substance is very attractive to insects and very dangerous. Here, filmed with time-lapse photography, is a leaf in action, curling round a trapped mosquito to kill it and eat it.
It's easy to be cynical, to take nature for granted.
But the older I grow, the greater my sense of wonderment. I marvel at the drama taking place within this tiny world. One footstep would blot it all out. We don't pick many wildflowers for the cottage, preferring to leave them where they are and enjoy them as we pass by. Two of my favourite flowers are the harebell and the wild thyme. But for me as a fisherman, there's one species that has a very special significance.
Oh, Kathleen, look. The first betony. It means it won't be long before we see the first sea trout.
Oh, no. It's super.
To search the river for the early arrivals is always so exciting. It's one of our great events of the year. And there they are, the first sea trout of the summer. It's a wonderful sight, and it has its own particular magic. Yesterday this pool was empty. Now suddenly these fish have materialized. Even though the river is at dead summer low, they left the sea last night and ran upstream under cover of darkness. I watched them with a sense of timelessness. Sea trout and salmon have been breeding in this river, going to sea and returning to breed for thousands of years, and will do for thousands of years to come if we give them a chance. Not so simple as it sounds. Half the rivers of Europe are dead, ruined by pollution. But this little river is still crystal clear, and these fish are still gloriously wild. Sea trout are some of the shyest fish that swim with the lightning-quick reactions of the wildest animal. A careless flicker of movement from me on the riverbank, an alarm begins to spread throughout the show, and suddenly the stage is empty. But they'll still be in the pool tonight, and my hunting instincts are ablaze. I long to hook one of them. There are lots of ways of hooking sea trout, but by far the most exciting is with a fly at dusk. It was Arthur Ransom who said that to catch a fish on a fly you've tied yourself is much more satisfying than catching a fish on a fly that someone else has tied, because it better satisfies the fisherman's instinctive desire to depend on himself alone in this voluntary contest with nature. And you know, he was absolutely right. The fish I catch tonight, if I catch any, will mean all the more to me because I've just tied the fly I hope to catch them on. We arrive on the riverbank at dusk, in late evening, when the sun is sinking behind the fells and the valley is in shadow. Parting day, Thomas Gray wrote, leaves the world to darkness and to me. But of course it doesn't. Evening brings its own solitude, but you're never really alone on a river bank. A raven on its way to roost circles overhead, its flight feathers magnificently spread like the fingers of two outstretched hands. In the slanting light, a cock pheasant struts towards the bog myrtle in a marshy hollow, from which a roe deer has emerged to start foraging for its evening meal. And soon out come the other creatures of darkness that keep us company at the waterside, the badger and the fox, all the animals that are just going to start their night's hunting. And now it's time for me to start.
Come on, boys. Come on, heel.
The light is fading and colour is beginning to disappear. We ford the river through fast, shallow water, heading towards the shingle bank of the pool where earlier I saw the shoal of sea trout lying. Now it is late dusk, dark enough for me to start fishing in such low, clear water. As I cast my fly across the river, Arcturus, the night fisherman's star, is shaking in the water at my feet. The valley is very quiet. There's only the sound of the river, and coming across the water meadows, the distant chimes of Muncaster Castle clock. Everything after nightfall is done by touch. I fish with tense anticipation, expecting at every cast to feel the sudden draw on the line as a fish takes the fly. My first sea trout of the season. Again, the line sings in the air and the fly swings round the tail of the pool. Then suddenly...
Got him.
But the fierce elation I feel when I hook a fish fades when I start to play it. I get little pleasure from fighting a fish. To outwit it, to get it to take my fly, that is the real challenge. After that, I want to kill it as quickly as I can. I hold the fish in my hands and gaze at its beauty. The sea silver of its side shines in the moonlight. I have a feeling of great achievement, and yet a curious regret. A strange dichotomy that many hunters experience, a part of their affinity with wildlife, respect for their quarry. But when all that is said, there is no better fish for the table than a fresh-run sea trout. It'll taste wonderfully well with a lettuce and cucumber salad. The short, dramatic midsummer night is over all too soon. Fishing stops at daybreak, and with 2 tired dogs and a bag of sea trout, I make my way up the fellside towards the cottage. High above me the larks are singing. Curlews are crying from the fell. I rely entirely on what I earn as a freelance, and I couldn't live like this if I didn't work hard. And I have a lot to do before I go to bed. But after a night's fishing, there's always time to stand and stare, to breathe the morning freshness and catch the beauty of the sunrise. But so soon, it seems, the colours of the countryside have changed to those of autumn. For every sea trout fisherman, summer's lease hath all too short a date. When my rods go into their cases, the gun comes out, and the dogs are in their element.
Give it.
Now Prince is doing the job I've trained him to do, and doing it supremely well, as one might expect. His sire is Sandringham Sidney, the Queen's field trial champion, which is why I called him Prince.
Good dog, it's dead. Come on, boy.
As the days shorten, Kathleen gathers the berries and wild fruit that she uses to make the jellies that complement the hares, rabbits, game and wildfowl that I hunt in winter. We take our share of rowan before the thrushes and starlings strip the lot. The summer migrants that came into the valley last spring are setting off on their long flight to southern Europe and beyond. Soon our winter migrants from the far north, the redwings and fieldfares, will be moving in. The dogs are fascinated when they see either of us up a ladder, seeming to think it strange that anyone should climb to nowhere. And you may think that I'm talking too much about them. But you see, they play such a very large and happy part in my life. I know there are people who hate dogs, but I feel there must be a great chunk of living that dog haters know absolutely nothing about. It's always seemed to me that provided a wildlife species is not endangered, it's absurd not to use the surplus numbers as a food supply. An example of this is the wood pigeon, which lives with us in millions.
Sit, Prince, sit. Good boy. Give it. Good boy. Dead. Good boy.
It might be interesting to have a look at the crop contents of the pigeon I've just shot. Crammed full of corn. And this is really quite a moderate cropful. I've shot pigeons that had more than this inside them. It isn't difficult to imagine what a few thousand birds can do to a field of corn or greens, and it doesn't take them long. In hard weather, I've seen 20 acres of Brussels sprouts cleaned up completely in less than a week. But some people not only underrate the pigeon as a pest, they underrate it as food. All too often they don't know how to prepare and cook it. Properly treated, pigeon meat can be delicious. Kathleen's pigeon pâté is a gourmet's delight. Another gastronomic treat underrated in Britain is the eel. As autumn daylight fades into night, thousands of eels that came upriver as elvers many years ago and reached maturity in fresh water are heading back towards the sea. During the past 6 months, the adult eel has been subject to a lot of changes in preparation for its long journey to the spawning grounds. The belly has changed from yellow to silver, the back has darkened, the eyes have enlarged, the snout has got sharper. Male eels seldom attain a length of more than a foot, so this one is probably a female. Migrating eels can even wriggle overland from isolated ponds and ditches to the rivers that take them seawards. This scene has been filmed in daylight with a captive eel, simply to show how easily eels can move through wet grass, instinctively heading towards water. In natural conditions, they move only at night, usually when there's no moon. And at this time of the year, when the last of the silver eels are gliding downstream towards the sea on the start of their long swim to the western Atlantic, the Eskdale and Ennerdale foxhounds are setting out for their opening meet of the season. For more than 100 years, they've met outside this centuries-old pub in the middle of the valley.
Thank you. Morning, Edmund. Morning, David. Right. Yes, fine. Thank you.
This famous fell pack is hunted on foot. It's been run by the same family for generations. Edmund Porter, the present huntsman, is the third in line. There's a traditional drink for the visitors, too.
Come and have a drink, come on. Go on.
What, me? The big
Yes,
drink?
you have to. You have to. All right? Yes, super. All of us, Edward.
For many of the fell farmers, this is more than a spectacle or a sport. It is the only defence they have at lambing time against the fox that kills by night. Hounds move off towards some of the finest fell country in Britain. But I'm not with them. There are times when I feel an irresistible urge to paint.
Somebody once said that if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. Well, that's certainly true of my painting. I can never begin to do justice to the beauty of this valley. It's a constantly changing scene of mist and cloud shadow and colour.
To me, it all seems just as lovely as it did 30 years ago. But today a lot of doom fingers point at the seemingly ineluctable horrors that threaten the beauty of our countryside. I can't believe they're right. But if they are, if all this really is destined to disappear under a heap of bricks and concrete and pollution, then perhaps our picture may give someone in the future a glimpse of what this little bit of England was once like, and what it meant to me.